Let's look at how much. Nigel Farage's party wants to scrap the two-child benefit cap. The Institute for Fiscal Studies said that would cost around £3.5 billion a year. They also want to spend £1.5 billion a year reinstating universal winter fuel payments. So far, pretty conventional. Many people in both Tory and Labour parties agree. But Mr Farage doesn't want to stop there. Reform UK says working people shouldn't start paying tax until they earn £20,000 a year. The IFS thinks that'll cost £50 to £80 billion a year. We don't know if the plan means national insurance contributions will be taken into account or not, by the way. And the Reform leader said he wants a more generous transferable tax allowance for married couples. The likely cost, £1.5 to £2 billion a year. In total, that's between £56.5 and £87 billion extra a year.
Philip strikes the conversation with one question from the first minute. Where on earth will Reform find the money?
One would hope not. Well, I certainly hope not. Look, Keir Starmer is panicking. The Prime Minister's panicking because he's well behind us now in the polls, having won a big majority last year. He's now 8 points behind in the gold standard YouGov poll. And, what's really interesting, he's talking about these, you just described the cost of eliminating income tax below £20,000 for British people would be about £60 billion if you take the midpoint of that IFS number. Let me give you some numbers. In June last year in Labour's manifesto, they claimed they were going to increase spending by £10 billion. 3 months later, Rachel Reeves' first Labour budget, they increased spending by £60 billion, and they found on that same magic money tree, they found another £30 billion for Chagos. So I'll tell you something, Trevor. People in this country are sick and tired. When it comes to British people, there's always no money left. When it comes to foreign citizens, there's a seemingly infinite amount of money available.
Let's not spend...
Yusuf's opening gambit. Why can Reform not create billions when Labour can? Make sure you like and subscribe.
Where number one, pension money is being invested into these ESG investment programs by mandate, and that's, frankly, a severely underperforming asset, so you're creating a wider deficit for pensions. And yes, we are looking very closely at areas that we can cut costs where it makes no impact on the constituents of the council.
That would include killing off final salary pension schemes for local council work, and presumably, if you got into national government, for civil servants too.
Well, that's an assumption. Look, we make no apologies.
No, I'm just asking whether it's what... Richard Tice says that's what you want to do. I'm just asking whether that's right or not.
Trevor, the cost of the civil service has ballooned. It's almost doubled in the last 50 years.
No, you're telling me what the problem is. I'm
asking
asking you about whether, as Richard Tice has suggested, you would kill off final salary pensions at councils that you control, and that if you were to get into government, you would do the same for Whitehall civil servants.
Yeah, I think we'd have to look at that. Look, I'm not going to make policy on the national civil service in real time on your show because we're taking the business of governance quite seriously. We just took control of 10 councils. But I will make no apologies and be very clear that Nigel stood up. What was extraordinary was, when was the last time you heard a political leader in this country with a real shot at Downing Street calling for 300 to 400 billion pounds of cuts in their first term of government? I cannot remember it inside my lifetime. Here's what's really crazy about this. Almost all of those cuts, Trevor, would actually improve the lives of British people. That is the state of decay in this country.
The Sky host wants a headline. Yusuf provides only a hint indicating where Reform's scalpel would fall without writing the prescription on broadcast.
Just to be absolutely clear, did you just say to me 300 to 400 billion pounds worth of cuts in public spending?
Correct.
That's what you're aiming
inside the first term. Yeah, that's exactly what Nigel said in his speech last week.
All right, well, let's talk about what will go. Where would the money come from? Let's just get rid of the whole idea of, getting rid of diversity and inclusion people. That'll get you 10 million. Where is the 300 to 400? I promise you. I know who they are. I know their names. Where would you get the 300 to 400 billion quid from?
The cost of DEI is pernicious, and we've cited the report. It was an independent think tank that had come up with that number, and it's well-sourced. But let's go through some really big numbers. Let's go through some really big numbers, shall we? So we have the £5 billion a year. We talk about infinite money for foreign citizens. £5 billion a year and growing that is currently being spent on people who come to the country illegally and make asylum claims. Then you have the cost of net zero, which we calculate to be the actual cost of the exchequer being around 45 billion, of which there is north of 12 billion, somewhere between 12 and 15 billion, that is directly inside government budgets. And that's before, Trevor, you talk about the fact that policy, this insane policy, is the one that gives us the most expensive energy costs in the world. And that is the fundamental reason why we have no growth. Well, hold on, you asked me some cuts, and, I'm going through them. Then there's the 265 billion that is inside Quangos. We're saying we're going to cut 5% of that. That number's from 2021, adjusted for inflation today, that number's closer to 320 billion. Okay. That's another 15 billion. Okay. I could go on. So Trevor, the reality is we're the only ones. We're the only ones who are serious about this stuff. And we're going to put that money back in the pockets of people watching this programme.
Let's examine them.
Though detractors will point out most came from reform's own arithmetic rather than the Treasury's, line-by-line numbers show. Make sure you like and subscribe.
It's throughout in a whole host of areas. So, for example, one area is the loss, for example, fuel and vehicle duty that is lost as a result of the frankly ridiculous intervention into private markets that the government has, for example, inside electric vehicles. That's a very significant amount.
So, hang on. So you're going to get rid of electric cars and make people pay? So where are you going to get the money from? We're
going to stop the state subsidies that are going into the, quote, electrification that is happening and the endless demands that are placed on automotive manufacturers, against their wishes, by the way. We talk about car manufacturing in this country. One of the reasons it has been decimated is because these companies that have made their businesses based on internal combustion engines are now being asked to make electric cars at a speed much faster than consumers want them.
Climate policy becomes the fault line. Phillips presents subsidies as modernisation. Reform sees them as waste.
OK, so we're killing off electric cars. £265 billion on Quangos. What are we getting rid of here? We're getting rid of the Health and Safety Commission, maybe?
I think that, well, number one, there is definitely an overzealous health and safety culture in this country. I think
Environment
coming into your studio is
you don't mind having sewage in the water?
Look, the notion that people watching this programme know in their bones that the notion that that it would be impossible to save 5% on a budget of north of £300 billion from bodies that, by the way, are essentially totally unaccountable. That is in their nature. And this stuff, frankly, the Tories have actually talked about this. They did nothing about it. They proliferated it. Labour, as usual, have taken what the Tories have done and made it worse. I
must say, though, that if I can be... Let me put this politely. You can toss out a number... like 265 billion, but you can't actually tell me where it's coming from. That's the amount that we spend on health service and defence. Oh, by the way, would you just get rid of the 50 billion we spend on defence? Maybe just buy a white flag? I mean, what are you doing?
You know what's funny, Trevor? During the general election campaign, Richard Tice and Nigel were pilloried for saying that it would be possible to find 5% savings. I remember it very vividly on these public budgets. But what's happened since then? Labour and Rachel Reeves have
I've asked you 3 times what Quangos you're getting rid of, and you can't tell me that.
The conflict crystallises. Yusuf promises broad audits. In the next few months, Phillips insists on surgical detail.
The conversation we're having might seem mildly unreal to people who have heard about efficiency savings, but from every government. Why do you think they failed and you're going to succeed to get 300 billion off the public purse?
So over the course of a full term. Yeah, well, some of these things are going to be foreign aid. We didn't talk about that. The idea, look...
Foreign aid's gone. It's gone, by the way.
Should
they cut it...
Trevor, should this country aspire to give foreign aid? Yes. In a world where we have hundreds of thousands of children living in poverty in this country, that's unconscionable.
The arithmetic of reform today rests on 3 pillars. Cut Quangos, stop foreign aid, eliminate green levies. Whether totals really reach 300 to 400 billion pounds, still Phillips' unresolved issue.
All right, let me just ask you a couple of quick questions which you can probably give a proper, an actual answer to. Dominic Cummings implied this week, the former Conservative advisor, that he'd been talking to Reform leadership, said that if Farage listened to him, Farage could be the next Prime Minister. Is he now advising your party?
I've never spoken to Dominic Cummings, so no.
OK. Would you like him to?
Look, I think Dominic Cummings, everyone watching these programmes knows who Dominic Cummings is. I think the things that he has said about the blob, about the civil service, about these inefficiencies that we're talking about, I think there's a lot of merit in those ideas, and he's been very vocal about that.
Zia Yusuf, thank you very much indeed. Cool. No doubt we'll talk about this again many times.
Indeed.
Even the rumour mill supports Reform's larger thesis. Whitehall bloat against insurgent austerity.
I must say, though, that if I can be... Let me put this politely. You can toss out a number like 265 billion, but you can't actually tell me where it's coming from. That's the amount that we spend on health service and defence. Oh, by the way, would you just get rid of the 50 billion we spend on defence? Maybe just buy a white flag? I mean, what are you doing?
I will come on your show in the next few months. We've already got some very, very interesting things coming out of the local councils, which are multi-billion-pound annual budgets. We are going to demonstrate to people in this country that in these enormous budgets, there's a huge lack of accountability. Money's being spent like a drunken sailor because it isn't their money, and it's totally unfair on the British taxpayer. We make no apologies for saying that we have to cut waste, and the idea, Trevor, that you cannot cut 5% on a budget of £300 billion is for the birds.
The interview finishes where it started. A distance between forensic costings and Reform's assurance that waste is all around, just waiting for the axe. Let us know what you think down below in the comments.